been thinking about the desire to belong a lot too, and because I think it has a lot to do where we place value. Because if we think about like places that we may not necessarily belong, but I don't care. Like I'm not even worried about that because I don't find value and I don't want to be a part of that. And so I think I know I'm thinking about Black people, but it's like the value that we place on white institutions that we don't feel that we have a place in or not designed for us or created for us. Why do we have that need and desire to belong? And I think that's maybe a real question that really needs to sort of, be dived, into and to kind of understand why are we placing values on institution and spaces that what are the positive things here? What are the pros that make me want to belong in this space? Is it just because I don't and I want to prove a point, or like what's really going on here, and sort of understand like where that desire is? It trying to combat my own insecurities? Like what is this thing really about? And understanding like that desire, like as an individual, but also like collectively.
Yeah, that makes me wonder how that questioning fits with this notion that belonging is this universal need. So is it just like, is it that anywhere that I am, I'm going to feel like I want to belong there, even if like I wonder to what degree can that even be controlled or not? Is there, but then to go along with your point, maybe it is about this value system, but yeah, I don't know. As you were talking, I was like, yeah. And I just like, can you even help yourself? Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a really good question, Taylor.
I definitely feel like there are spaces where some people don't want to belong to. Is that what you were saying? Like people are just going to want to belong in any space?
Are you talking to me, Joanna? Yeah, I guess I just wondered, I guess it's tricky too because school is compulsory. So you have to be there in America at least, so it feels like in my mind, I was thinking, yes, so school wasn't designed with Black students in mind, but we have to be there. Is there even an option to disengage enough or to devalue enough to be like, I don't care if I belong there or not? I think in other places, if you don't want to be in a bowling team, you don't have to, if you walk in a bowling alley, you don't have to feel like you have to belong there. So I think you're right. But I guess school's a unique thing because it's a part of our society, so ingrained in our society, we have to show up to it. And so it just feels like there's like less choice, I guess, is maybe the point that I was wondering about.
I feel like some of the way that students show that though is like not going to class, not coming to school, not doing your work in class, like disengaging, like you're there physically, but you're not really there. So a lot of students, teachers are like, oh, you don't care about education, you don't care about school. Yeah, I do. I don't care about the space that I'm in. And that's why there's a difference between like students going to a teacher who they like and they're able to like engage in new things, and then in another space they're not. So it's really about like, okay, like I don't want to be in this space, so I'm not really here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was reading like this little news article maybe like the other day, and it's the superintendent up in a school district in Virginia, and they do their school survey climate things or whatever, and typically you see the disparities of belonging among like your Black and brown students versus your white students, and they're saying now that they're remote, the Black and brown students, you're not seeing those disparities, and they have a higher sense of belonging now that they're at home. And he's like, well, this is concerning because you're telling me that you being at home, you feel more welcomed in my school district than you do when you're in these buildings. And so now he's trying to figure out, okay, so kids may come back to school. What are we going to do? Like, how do we solve this problem? Or what is the explanation for this? Because a lot of white parents are like, I need these kids back in school, and they don't want their kids at home. So thinking about, are these schools seem to be made for white achievement and white success, and it's not serving these other kids. And so what does that mean for them? And like you said, like Brooke, it's like, okay, I don't feel like I have choice, but do I only feel like I don't have a choice because I've never been able to see an alternative? And so thinking deeply and diving into what alternatives might look like for those children because they're not being served here.
I also think about like
Taylor, I read this.
Oh, go ahead.
It's okay. Go ahead, Brittany.
I was just thinking about like historical context, like how Brooke was saying, like how schools weren't created with people of color or Black people in mind. And then I think about like the force and the ramifications of integration, right? And how that was such a traumatic, I would say, experience for the Black community, because it was the onus of the Black community to get Black children to the white schools, and they were now in these white spaces. And when I think about the teaching force today, which is still over 80% white middle class women, I think about the perpetuation of what possibly harms children being kind of like not just the systems, but also the people who are serving in the roles that are teaching the students, right? And I think about, however radical it may be, that in order for the value to come back, I think about the benefit of, I'm talking about Black students here, being taught by Black communities in Black spaces, right? And I say that, I guess, from a personal experience, because my own children, I pulled them out of public schools, and now they're in a space where it's self-led learning, but it's also, they have this like ideology where they are represented, when they are studying the histories of people that look like them, right? And they are being told the truths that are not necessarily told in public school systems. So I always think about when we have all of these initiatives and efforts to offer students of color or marginalized community like more after school activities and just more of this, but not really addressing the issue or the systems that have continued to place them in the positions where they are not being successful. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go along with what you were saying. I think that's also why there are spaces where there are, like you said, homeschool collectives, there are like Afrocentric schools, there are these charter schools that are trying to be spaces for Black students. But then what happens to students who maybe don't know about these options, or maybe they just can't get into these schools, they're kicked out of these schools, because you can easily be kicked out, of spaces that are not public schools. So those are other things to consider.
Yeah, that's where my thoughts went to. Where it's like, there are these alternative spaces that do exist, but it's like numerically and logistically, is it feasible to say, well, let's just put all of our Black and brown kids in these alternative spaces? That ideally that would be great, and I very much so agree with Brittany in terms of them being taught by people who look like and reflect their experience and who they are. And it makes me think, when we start talking about going to the root of public schools and the issues there, the change definitely needs to come like at the root, because that's what it is. The root is what's not built for us. And all of these little initiatives, like you said, after school programs or this club or this club, none of that addresses the root. It's a lot of periphery. It's a lot of, well, no. We want to look like we're doing things for you. We've offered this. We're trying this, and we don't know. They just can't learn. It's very much surface level. I think Taylor, yeah, I just saw it, like the illusion of inclusion, exactly. And so it makes me wonder and think about, are we too far gone with this? Can there not be a deeper change, or do we say, well, let's just find alternatives? I don't know, but
that's what I was going to ask. Like, can roots be changed? Like, does the whole system need to be dismantled? Are there implementations that can be done to change the system in a way that, is really authentically changed? Taylor?
When I think alternative, I do not think about alternatives within that system. I'm thinking about planting new trees, and that tree gonna do what it do, and civilizations rise and fall all the time. So my alternatives are not within that network at all when I think alternative. And I don't even know if I would say alternative. So I don't think that I'm not interested in reform. I'm not into that. So I don't think so. And that's why my thought process has always been about, this idea of this conceptual sovereignty or this freedom dreaming, like Dr. Patina Love talks about, is like, what would things look like outside of the context of white supremacy? And a lot of people, they don't know. A lot of people are afraid to find out, or a lot of people just really don't even care. But I'm really interested in the ones who do. And I think that, of course, there needs to be, teams that are thinking and trying to come up with solutions for the babies that are in that system and are in that situation. But it's also like we have to have some of our energy going towards like what else, like what's new, what's different, and like what can this become, and what does this look like? And if we can look at the education system that we have right now, the belonging interventions we have right now, all the things that we have right now, okay, what's working, what's not, what do we like, what don't we like? All right, we gonna take this, what we not gonna take it, and that's how we sort of like build something new that we actually like and that we actually like, works for us. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about you know, how I want to occupy this space, how I'm thinking about this space, how I'm thinking what's going on. And of course, like that historical context, you have to understand what's been done before. You have to understand what's led you to this point. And so that you can be able to look forward and see what worked and what didn't work, so that we can kind of create something, and see if it works, right? But not repeating the same mistakes twice, I think, is something that I really would like to avoid. And so, yeah.
What do you think that looks like though? Because we have schools like that are separate. So is it like a public space? What do you may not know, but I'm just wondering what you think it looks like.
What do you mean when you say separate and public? Or
Like there are like I said, Afrocentric schools, or there are not necessarily charter schools because those still come with their problems. Like there are like co-ops of like homeschooling parents that get together so that they can teach their kids. I'm just wondering, like, what does it look like if we're not in a public school?
I mean, I think it looks kind of like how people are talking about it. I think when it comes to these co-ops or the home collectives, I think it starts by building networks and building because we're talking about, those are individual situations, those are reaching people on a small scale, but it's how can we scale this? How can we expand our reach? How can we get people connected and kind of on the same page and thinking about the same things? And I think it kind of starts with understanding, what do people want? Like what what would you like to see? Like what kind of things do you want your students involved and engaged with? And start to figure out, because I don't even think we have a clear consensus, you know, on what we want or what we think we need.
Tell us what we want.
Huh? We want people to tell us what we want. That's what we want. We want a leader, you know, we want the one person to tell us, and that ain't how it works. So yeah, I think we got to have a, you know, meeting of the minds.